Welcome to NDTR Spotlight, the corner of the internet where NDTR shine. I'm your host, Marie Lorraine, and today I am so excited for this, for our guest. I have been following her since the beginning of NDTR Spotlight, and she has been following NDTR Spotlight since the beginning, and I've wanted her on the podcast for so long, and she's finally reached out and said she was ready and wanted to share her story with us. So she has her Bachelor's of Science in Human Nutrition and Foods, and she's also Serve Safe certified. And she is currently working in, where is she working? Sorry, she's currently working in school nutrition. She's a school nutrition worker and a dietary assistant at an eating disorder treatment center. So super cool. And on top of that, she is very active on social media, which is how I was able to connect with her. And she has recently started a blog called Carpe Diem. And she has very interesting articles on there, ranging from nutrition recipes to just topics on nutrition, including one really interesting article I just have to point out because when I saw it, I had to read it. And it's called Why This Nutritionist Always Keeps Cookie Dough in the Freezer. So definitely interesting topics to read on. And she also has an Instagram page that's very, very fun to follow. She's constantly posting other NDTRs in her stories or other nutritionists in her stories and puts out really interesting, fun content. Some things about iron or micronutrients. And my favorite personally is her food puns. They're handmade and drawn. So they're just so unique. And I'm often sharing them on the NDTR story. So without further ado, let us meet Jolanta. Jolanta, thank you so much for being here.
Hi. Thank you for having me. This has been so long. I remember beginning of this year, you wanted me on, and then life happened. So I'm so happy to be on here and share what's been going on.
Yes. And I am so eager to hear all of the details. But first, let's start with just the general question of how you found out about the NDTR credential.
So I kind of found about it when I went to university, but it wasn't like, oh, you should become a DTR and alongside becoming an RD. It was kind of just like, oh, you can take the DTR exam as, to boost up your RD application for the internship. So it wasn't really talked about that much. Actually, when I became a DTR, a few friends from when I went to university with, they're like, what's a diet tech, and so it really wasn't talked about, but I was like, you know what, it can help me out in my career and my future endeavors, so might as well go for it.
Yeah, that's that. Were your friends also in the dietetics major, or were they in a different?
Oh yeah, they
Okay.
were in the dietetics
Oh,
program
they
too.
were, and they didn't know.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Okay, yeah, we're working to get this credential out there more so people
That's why I'm
know
so
about it.
happy to to learn about your platform and just spreading the word, I guess.
Yes, it's so important. So then you became an NDTR June 2020, if I remember
Mm-hmm.
correctly. So what made you pursue it?
Graduated fall of 2018, and I had really planned on getting into that dietetic internship, but then, life didn't go as I wanted. And then I went back into food service for a little bit. And then I realized, oh, I can become a manager and I can uh, boost that with the NDTR credential. And so I was thinking about that for a while. And then I had planned on taking the exam April of 2020. And then COVID happened, as we all know. So then I had to take the exam on June 2020. So
How did that process work? Did they call you or reach out to you and say, we're not doing the exam, you have to postpone the time?
so
Or
they sent an email out to everyone like, hey, there's this pandemic happening. So we got to hold on for a little bit with that. So I was so ready in April to take the exam, and then I already have a little bit of test anxiety, like everyone does. So I was I felt like I had to really review for those 2-3 months until my next exam. Well, also at first I didn't know when I would be taking the exam again. They were just like, okay, we're refunding everyone's exam fees, and then we'll let you figure out when you want to take it next. Yeah.
That sounds like that's rough to not know. Wow.
Oh, it was. But then they opened earlier than they had actually anticipated, because they're like, since it's considered, we're considered essential workers in a sense, that we could work in hospitals and stuff. They were really trying to get us in there for the exam.
That's nice.
Yeah.
DTRs are essential workers. You heard it here from Jolanta. So you
Yeah.
have a very interesting, unique situation with taking that NDTR exam. So how did you handle that studying of like not knowing when you're taking the exam, and what were your study strategies and all of that?
I'm not saying that I necessarily recommend what I did, but I'll let you know what I did. So I was ready to take it in April, but then I was like, what I did is, like, since I didn't know when I was gonna take my exam next, um, I kind of like took a break for a month, and then I basically restarted it in the sense that I tested myself on what I wasn't as secure about in the certain areas, and then I quizzed myself over those areas and doing a little bit of review on the stuff that I was more confident on. But basically that was my study plan.
Okay, so giving yourself accurate breaks and then studying what you don't know, which is that's smart, but definitely not the fun way to do it. But yeah. So in the midst of all of this, you were very active on Instagram with your page
Mm-hmm.
Cardi DM Nutrition. Can you tell
Mm-hmm.
us kind of that inspiration behind the name and being on Instagram, being online?
Mm-hmm. So the name, it actually starts with, in high school I took Latin for 4 years, so I had to, do something a little bit nerdy. So for Carpe Diem, I really wanted a space that nutrition seemed really approachable, because I feel like for a lot of nutrition spaces, they try to make nutrition like sexy when it's like not at all. Um, so I want to make nutrition approachable, and that's why I started doing the food puns and all of that, because I wanted like an entryway. So it's like, oh, it isn't about, getting the max amount of antioxidants or the max amount of protein or whatever. I just wanted to be like, oh, the food you eat is good, and here's some ways that maybe we can change it out a little. But I started social media actually, like, taking it more seriously around when the pandemic started, because with the jobs that I wasn't working at the time when the pandemic had started. Um, so I was like, I need some outlet, to get back on my feet, and maybe it would help with, my future career. Um, so yeah, that's why that all happened. I think I
Yeah.
answered your question,
You did. You
all
definitely
parts.
did. And I love that you had that perspective of like, I'm going to be on here to help me in the future with my future career. It wasn't just on just to post things, but it was more like for growth. And that's honestly so refreshing to say that you're not trying to make nutrition sexy. Everyone's trying to make everything sexy, but just
Mm-hmm.
having nutrition speak for itself is very refreshing. And I definitely think it comes through hearing you say that and having followed you these past couple of months. I definitely see that you don't have that approach, but it's just a very nice, simple, and enjoyable approach to following your page. So you also recently started the blog. So
Oh
what
yeah.
made you, well, yeah, what made you go into that realm outside of Instagram?
So the thing with Instagram is that for the caption, you have a little bit of a limit, and I always overgo on the limit. So I was like, well, I've kind of always wanted to start a blog, but I felt like that was too much of a commitment. But then I kept getting frustrated with the Instagram caption limit. So I'm like, might as well go ahead and go with that. But a lot of the content is similar enough that it doesn't feel like it's two completely separate projects. So that's been helpful with that. So yeah, that's really why I started it. And also, I felt like it was just a better place to have everything for me personally. I don't know. I just like the idea of a website too.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's you're right. You can go in a lot more depth in a blog. And your posts are pretty unique. The recipes you have and the like I mentioned in the intro, cookie dough in the freezer. So where's your inspiration behind the posts you write for your blog?
So a lot of it has to do with, well, real world experience for the most part. Just seeing some topics of what other people are talking about too. Also, well, for the recipes, it's just what I eat. I don't know how else to have that.
That's fair.
Some of it, like for my recipes, for the most part, I like to show that you can really switch up a recipe. So it's not like, oh, you have to follow this recipe to a T. It's like, oh, this is kind of just more of a guideline than like a strict rule situation.
Yeah, giving people that freedom to cook.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I like to follow recipes. I do not like to follow word for it. I'm like, this is a great idea. I'm going to try it.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like, I don't think I followed a recipe in like eons. So, like, if when I write down, like, it's funny because, like, my friends, they're like, oh, we want your recipes. And it's like, I have to write this down. Like, it's just a little bit of this, a little bit of that kind of thing for me. Um, but yeah.
Yeah, so that's an interesting perspective because I know I'm personally like that and I find writing recipes to be just annoying because I'm like it's just a general thing and I feel like in this field as DTRs people are always asking for recipes as you just said in
Mm-hmm.
your experience. So how do you having that kind of mentality, how do you formulate these recipes and write them out down to make sure that they work for people and
Mm-hmm. Well, so I basically just make the recipe, right, and then I write afterwards. It's not like, I plan ahead like what I'm gonna do.
Mhm.
It's more like, oh, I happen to do it this time this way. But then I think for some of them I add variations at the end so that, you know, you can take it, choose your own adventure situation.
Yes, and I see that. I'm currently looking at your post and you have variations on the bottom, which is a
Mm-hmm.
nice addition to add to recipes to give people that freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's your online world of
Uh-huh.
Cardi Diem, Carpe Diem. I'm sorry, I'm messing up the name.
It's okay.
But I know that you were doing the job search for a
Mm-hmm.
while. So how did that job search go for you?
So, since we talked about the pandemic, there was a while where I was like, oh my God, I don't want to have to go back to retail ever again. And so I actually saw a opening for a school nutrition worker in a school district nearby. And I was like, oh, I gotta take up that opportunity because, I could at least move my way up to management if that was the case. And it works out really well. I'm still currently in that worker position, but I have a really great team, so it's all good. And then in the past month, yeah, it seems like it feels like longer than that. I was looking for a second job, for the extra income. And I saw a position for a dietary assistant at the Eating Recovery Center. And it's been great with that.
Yeah, okay. So two very separate kind of worlds that you're working in. And I just want to say before we go into the other job you're working, I think it's really admirable that you're taking that kind of entry level job with that mindset
Mm-hmm.
again of moving up. Because if you ever go into school nutrition as like a
Mm-hmm.
DTR manager or whatnot, you're gonna know what your workers are doing. So I definitely applaud you for doing that. But so kind of going with that, did you find that the DTR credential on your resume helped you get that job faster, or did you notice anything there?
For the eating disorder treatment center, for sure. Like actually in the interview, they're like, "So I see that you're a DTR," and I'm like, "Yes, I am." So that was a really good bonus. I don't think they were looking for anyone specifically with the DTR credential, but I think it definitely helped.
That's good. So they knew it was when you were, they knew what the DTR was on your
Yeah,
resume.
the recruiter knew what it was, and they actually they saw, oh, you're also a social media manager at Carpe Diem Nutrition, and they were asking me about what my nutrition philosophy was, because with eating disorders, you have to have a certain nutrition philosophy in terms of all foods fit approach. So they were really happy to see that I was anti-diet and weight inclusive in my philosophy as well.
Yeah. That's interesting too. So you have you put social media on your resume, what you're doing on.
Yeah, because I feel like it's professional enough that I could put it on there, and it worked out. So,
Yeah, that's great. That's a great little tip to like beef up your resume because it's so much work to run an Instagram page and then
oh my gosh, yeah.
the content you're putting
How
out
do you
is
do it
good.
with a podcast situation as well?
What? Say that one more time.
How do you do it with a podcast
Oh,
situation as well?
well, I'm currently not working. So I just finished grad school. So I'm still not into that
That's
world
true.
yet. So I'm still able to balance it a little bit. And I know
Uh-huh.
people's comments definitely keep me going. And then being able to interview and talk to people like you, it's so inspiring. So passion, I guess, is what's keeping me
100%.
going.
I'm all the way there with you.
It's the passion. So in this new position that you're doing, what does your job entail?
So we don't do any of the cooking at the facility for the most part. 95% of what we do is ordering and catering for the residents, and then we portion it out to what the dietitian recommends for each of the patients. And then also sometimes we sit with the patients, and lead the group and redirect certain patients if they're um, saying inappropriate things during the meal, or they're going back into some of their eating disorder habits. Um, yeah.
Wow, that is fascinating. Okay, so you're talking to someone who does not has no experience with eating disorders, and
Uh-huh.
I'm going to assume some of the audience members doesn't know either. So how do you redirect someone with an eating disorder when they're eating, and how do you identify if they're going
Mm-hmm.
back? What does that look like?
So we're a trauma-informed care facility. So it's a lot of more neutral sayings. It's not like stop doing that. It's more like, I noticed that you're doing this. Can you do this instead? And all of that. Um, yeah, that's the main thing with redirecting.
Yeah, so acknowledging what they're doing and then giving them a choice to do something else. Is that
Yeah.
how you would sum that up? Okay. And
Mhm.
so eating disorders, what type of eating disorders have you seen or what that your clients have there?
So we have treatment plans for anorexic nervosa, ARFID, binge eating. Um, yeah, I think that's for the most part the patients that I've seen. We do have other treatment options. I just haven't met those patients yet.
Mhm, mhm. So and so with those different type of eating disorders, the way you talk to them, it's the same, I'm assuming, or is it different based on?
Yes and no. Like, so we would have the same philosophy with redirecting them in terms of, noticing what they're doing and then saying, can you do this instead? Having a very neutral tone about it. But since their eating disorder kind of manifests in different ways, then you would say there would be different conversations around it usually. Like, for example, an anorexic patient versus a patient with binge eating disorder, that would be a very different setup.
Yeah, sounds like a lot. Sounds like a lot of stuff to learn and to understand.
Yeah, well, for the first 2 3 weeks we've been in training, so it's you're really prepared for it. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, because that's a whole niche in nutrition that is very important and difficult because
Mhm.
there's that psychology part of it
Yeah.
that is like someone else's scope. So, working as an NDTR and being an NDTR in the middle of the pandemic, I'm curious to hear what your perspective is of what has been a little frustrating or annoying or just challenging about holding this credential.
I really have any frustration specific to the 2020 pandemic. I think more of the frustration is, not enough people knowing about the NDTR credential. And also at the same time, I feel like I found a really great community within the NDTR community, and everyone's so supportive, and it's just fantastic.
I think that's an interesting thing you brought up about the NDTR community because I, being in this, doing this podcast, I've definitely seen that. So, in your experience, how did you break into the NDTR community for anyone listening and curious about
hmm
how to enter that?
So first thing I did is I put that I'm in NDTR in my little profile, and then um, in my tags I put NDTR diet tech, just to, send out a signal like, hey, I'm here. Um, because I also didn't know anyone who was a dietetic technician when I took the exam. So I've been really lucky to find people through social media with that.
Nice. So your networking was primarily through social media and putting that
Actually, I
NDTR.
think primarily through your account, to be honest.
That's fine. I'm glad to be the hub of it. But yeah, that's how I find people too. I look up the NDTR on Instagram and anyone who has NDTR in their bio, I'm like, okay, let's come together and like know each other and
Yeah,
build a relationship and communicate. So
absolutely.
that's good. And it's been so fun building that community and following other DTRs and seeing what they're doing.
hmm
So, kind of on that idea of building community and networking with NDTRs, I want to ask you about diversity, but I want to make it specific to in the field of DTRs. What has been your
Okay.
experience with like seeing DTRs and networking with the people that you've met online?
I mean, like I said, most of the people that I know as dietetics are through you. And
Mhm.
I think you do a fantastic job of showing the diversity of dietetic technicians. Um, there's just so many things that we can do as diet techs that I had no idea that I could do when I even took the exam. So I've been like really happy to learn, like, oh my gosh, people are doing private practices. Like I thought only RDs could do that. It was just so cool to see what everyone's doing.
Yeah, I I I agree as well. It's cool seeing that diversity and finding it. And I find that it's been pretty easy to find. Like I haven't been trying to find. I'm not like, oh, I need to find someone who's Hispanic. I need to find someone who's Black. It's just kind of
Right.
who I find, and it's cool seeing that it is. It's not as um, one race as people I think are thinking it is. It's
hmm
growing and it's diversifying really nicely.
I think it also
Everything.
depends on the area that you live, because like I live in Houston and it's very diverse here. Like actually I went to University of Houston, which they were bragging about how it's like the second most diverse school in US. So like, it's really not, I think it really depends on where you are more
That's a good,
so.
yeah. That's a good point. That's awesome though that you got to go to a school that was
Uh-huh.
so diverse. That just adds
I
to
learned so much just by like, talking to people, let alone the classes. Yeah.
yeah. And I think that's why diversity is important because you learn
hmm
so much from people who just have different experiences than you,
hmm
which is so awesome. So, Jolanta, you have a career, you have your Instagram. And you have this mindset that you've brought up a couple times of planning for the future. Like, I could use this in the future. I could use this in the future. So, what are your thoughts about your future in this field of nutrition?
So I am excited about what's going to happen. I'm not completely sure yet, but I do plan on becoming an RD in the future. Let's see when that happens. But yeah, that's pretty much for all my future plans with that.
Yeah, that I'm excited to see how that happens for you. And I know that with the experience you're getting now as a DTR, every DTR that has gone on they've never regretted their experience
Oh
working
no.
as a DTR. So that's so I'm excited and I'm going to keep following you. And I encourage everyone to follow Carpe Diem Nutrition. Make sure you follow her. Is there anything that you want to leave with the NDTR audience to encourage them or tell them more about you?
I've noticed with a lot of the interviews, because I follow the NDTR spotlight, kind of religiously, um,
Thank you.
that there's kind of like this confidence issue that us as DTRs have a lot of times because people don't know a lot about our credential. But I think the most important lesson that I've taken away from all these interviews is to follow goals, not necessarily titles. With that, and also finding people who really support your goals also. That's been most helpful to me in
Yeah,
my journey.
that's good. Follow the goals. And
Mhm.
and so following the goals, would that help with confidence? Is that what you were, because you mentioned confidence?
Yeah, I think so, because like for me, um with my goals, like I knew I wasn't really looking at a title with, like, for example, working in mental health. It's more just like I knew that I wanted to learn about mental health more because I had learned so much through like just a brief overviews on Instagram, that I'm like, okay, I need to learn more about getting in the field.
Yeah, that's a great mindset. I appreciate that feedback. I hope everyone enjoyed the interview. We're going to close out. Thank you so much, Jolanta, for your time. This was so wonderful. And again, follow her on Instagram and read those blog posts. You can put your email in and they get sent right to your email. And that's how I am able to find and read them. So we will see you in our next interview. Thank you so much for watching.